My name is Lonnie C. King, Jr. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I was at Morehouse College in 1960 when we began the movement. The movement was called the Atlanta Student Movement today, I guess you would say, but it was really called the Committee on Appeal for Human Rights. And I was the chairman, the founding chairman from its inception until August of, its inception in 1960 until August of 1961. Well, I was tricked by the African-American leadership, primarily Jesse Hill, whom I trusted very, very much. He called me and asked me to come to the most important meeting in my life. And I told him, okay, and I called my friend Herschel, who was co-chairman, to go with me. We walked into this meeting, and here was all the powers that be in the town, black and white, that we've been fighting, some black too that we were fighting. And they'd cut a deal to desegregate the lunch counters only if the school desegregation in the fall went peacefully. I wasn't about to do that. And so we went through this fight off and on, off and on, off and on. So finally, Daddy King and I got into a big altercation. Frank Neely, who was the chairman of Rich's Department Store at the time. Dick Rich had the name, but the man who ran it was Frank Neely, he was the chairman. He was sitting across from me, and he had a cane. And he kept hitting me with that cane. I never understood that, even to this day. But when King's father and I got into this altercation, Frank Neely said, Daddy King, he's the only person in here who's been elected. The rest of us have been appointed. There's nothing wrong with him going back to talk to his folks to see if they want to go along with this. And of course, Ivan Allen, who chaired the meeting, along with Walden, called for a recess. And they started beating on me. Reverend Dr. Clement came over to me and he said, well, if you go along with it, you're going to be condemned. If you don't go along with it, you're going to be condemned. He said, you're in a setup here. So I finally agreed to go along with the plan so long as it was absolutely in writing that the lunch counters will desegregate as soon as the schools desegregate. Now, the man who really convinced me to go along with it was John Calhoun. He was the president of NAACP, so forth and so on. And he made a very poignant comment to me. He said, Lon, I was born in 1899. And all of my life I have been segregated. And if I only have to wait 3 or 4 months before I can go downtown and have some degree of desegregation, it's a short time for me. He said, I know you don't like this, but I think you ought to accept it and then take it back to the students and see what they think. And that's what I did. When I took it back, the students, my committee went, wow, no, we aren't going to do this. And so I resigned, and so did Herschel. Well, they didn't expect us to do that, and I didn't either expect to do that, but they then turned around and said, no, you can't leave, so they re-elected us right at that same meeting. And then they called a mass meeting at Warren Memorial Church for a few days later. During those days, you could get 2,000 people in a meeting almost overnight. So they had this big meeting down there, and that meeting is taped, by the way. You may want to take a look at that tape. They wanted me to preside at the meeting, and Dr. M. Carl Holman said, no, hell, you all created this problem. You at Herschel, you all sit down. You all created this problem, you run it. And so they wouldn't listen to Dr. Borders. They wouldn't listen to any of these preachers. And so Daddy King got up, and he was trying to talk, and they would just not let him talk. So finally, Daddy King made the mistake of saying, he got angry. He said, I've been working on civil rights for the last 30 years. And he was admonishing the children, I guess. And a lady in a white outfit got up and said, and that's what's wrong. And when she said that, the place erupted. And Daddy King was very embarrassed. And so Dr. King Sr. had told me he was out of town. So I called him. By this time he had moved to Sunset Avenue. And I said, can we get you to come up here? He said, I have a cold, and Lonnie, I'm tired. I said, they just booed your daddy up here. I said, and this crowd is unruly, and I think you need to come up here and help us out. He said, I'll be there in a few minutes. So he came in, and Martin King had tears in his eyes, okay? Because by this time I told him about his dad being booed. The man made the greatest speech I ever heard him make, and I've heard a lot of his speeches. He took that crowd up the hill, down the hill, you name it. By the time he finished, everybody was calm. They didn't like the agreement, but they respected Martin King Jr. and his words. The most important thing he said that I think was that we cannot afford the cancerous disease of disunity. He said, now I wouldn't have agreed to this if I had been there. But people who have been working all their lives trying to make things better for us, they agreed, and I trust some of them. It was the way he put it. Let's see if this thing works. And if it does not work, then, you know, he'll be very involved. So I'd have to say that was a very pivotal meeting. Martin King made a speech much, much greater than the speech he made in the March on Washington. It was a great speech.